Hi everybody, can you guess what this is? This is a whole Bole Kaja from way back in time, and we're going on a trip. Come with us, let's take you back into time. Come with us as we go on this journey. See you. We're here at the Afro-Brazilian Center, and you might guess where we are. We're inside the Bole Kaja and having a conversation about food, Lagos, tourism, destinations and landmark. And here we are again with our fantastic brunch. But before we get into all that, I would like to hear more about some of the destinations we saw while taking a drive around some of these famous landmarks in Lagos, like the Holy Cross Church, King's College, the Marina. Well, let me just say all that and let Madam Aduke Gomez tell us more about some of these locations like the Holy Cross.
Okay, so you know, Holy Cross is situated on Catholic Mission Street. Okay, it's called Catholic Mission Street because it's within the Brazilian Quarters. The Brazilian Quarters is so called because this part of the island, Lagos Island, was given to the returnees from Brazil, some from Cuba, to settle when, and we are talking now anytime from 1850s onwards, and these are the people who were formerly enslaved and had been kidnapped from West Africa and Nigeria, taken over to Brazil. Some of them came back after a certain amount of years. Some were first generation, second generation. My father's grandfather, for instance, came back after 20 years there. But when they came back, because they'd been exposed in Brazil to the Catholic faith, and they were now coming back after the 1860s to a colonial state where the religion was the what we refer to as the Anglican religion, the Church of England. The Afro-Brazilians didn't feel comfortable with that, so they wanted their own church, the Catholic faith. So at first there was a Father Antonio, who used to come over from and marriages and funerals and so on. Eventually the Reverend Fathers came, settled at Catholic Mission, which is why Catholic Mission is called Catholic Mission, because they set up a mission there. And then eventually the community got together and began to build the church. And that church grew up to be the spiritual foundation of the Afro-Brazilian Quarters. And that's Holy Cross Cathedral. It was built by Afro-Brazilian artisans. One of the hallmarks of the Afro-Brazilian returnees was particularly their trade in the building industry. So how people have an impression of how Lagos used to look, the curly queues, the verandas, the buildings, the designs, those were all influenced by the work of the Afro-Brazilian builders. And this church is very beautiful. The one that you're looking at now was built in 1935.
That's the Holy Cross Church?
That's the Holy Cross Cathedral, yes.
Okay.
But there has been a building on that site since the 1880s.
Wow.
And in fact, the very first carnival held in Lagos was around that 1880s, 1890s, to mark the laying of the foundation stone. And that's when the very first carnival was held. And carnival is held in the Lagos Island area Christmas Day, New Year's Day, and Easter Monday. Yes.
Oh. You know, while driving around these, you know, historical sites, I can't help but, you know, notice the akara on our roads, and it's typical of stuff Lagosians eat on Sunday. Agege bread, akara. I think no combination can be, you know,
absolutely
compared to this.
But let me tell you a fun thing.
Yeah.
So we call it akara. Now, a lot of the enslaved people who were taken particularly to Brazil were of Yoruba extraction. So they spoke Yoruba, and in Brazil till today they have a dish, looks like this, but it's called akara, and it's called that from the Yoruba women who used to make akara and use it as a calling card. Akara, come and eat akara. Until today in Brazil, they still have it.
So how do we put all this into a narrative? The agege bread coming to Nigeria, the akara, because a whole lot of history sits on this table here.
Absolutely. And I think that, you know, it's, to me, it's very interesting because it's a circular story of food.
Okay.
Of the transatlantic slavery links, the diaspora links.
Okay.
Let's take agege bread. Okay, wheat is not indigenous to this part of the world, so we didn't eat bread. Eventually, it was introduced to our diet following the colonial process. But a very important person in that process was somebody called Mr. Shackelford, and Mr. Shackelford was a Jamaican who first came with the railways, the Nigerian railways, and then he set up a bakery in Agege, which is why it's called Agege bread.
Agege bread.
The famous Agege bread, absolutely. And
so a lot of history here.
And so Mr. Shackelford, coming from Jamaica, is a returnee. He too is part of a person or descendants of people who would have been displaced by kidnapping and enslaved to Jamaica, but he came back and returned and settled. His bread was famous. He became rich. In fact, he lived in Ikoyi. The Wheat Baker Hotel, which I'm sure you know, was actually his home. And that is how, I think, sitting on this plate, we have Mr. Shackelford, who brought who made agege bread famous and popular, and akara, which left and developed a whole life of its own in Brazil.
Oh wow.
I think it's fascinating.
Oh wow. So anytime you're passing through Lagos and you bump into Wheat Baker Hotel, you definitely remember who bought
Yes.
the bread. And
I think while we are talking about akara and we are talking about beans, which is what akara was made from, and we're talking about the Afro-Brazilians, I think we should also talk about how, again, a circular thing. Okay. Amongst the Afro-Brazilians on Good Friday, they eat feijão. Feijão is made from beans, coconut milk, cloves, simmered together for hours and then is eaten as a non-meat dish on Good Friday. But it's interesting because the beans that are used to make fejon and are the same beans made to use akara and akara are not indigenous to South America, but actually were taken from West Africa when they were taking the enslaved people as a means of feeding them. But that too has become part of the Brazilian food culture. Until today, they eat feijão in Brazil. So I think that for me, when we are eating food, sometimes I think we don't really fully understand the stories we are imbibing at the same time.
I feel already like I'm traveling in time, sitting inside the bole kaja with agege bread, with akara.
But I'm gonna have some akara. I don't know about you.
You know, I want to feel like there's so much to our food, and then the ingredients. Like now, we got a little bit of ewa going on the road, and you know, and this is all part of beans as an ingredient, from akara to moi moi to what else again? You mentioned the frijon, and I think food is just like a kind of roadmap to history and everything.
Absolutely, because again, ewa going, it refers to the settlers from Togo who came and settled and are now a big part of the Lagosian heritage, as it were. But we don't think of it when we eat ewa agoin. That this too is a historical food that has come from somewhere and has now been subsumed into something that we eat every day also.
Wow. So every time you have agege bread and akara, try and remember some of these stories, and remember the journey we've started today. We're still going to go on to other states, other ingredients we're going to explore. Just sit back and watch and journey with us back into time.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Enjoy your zobo
and akara with agege bread.